The film She-Devil, produced and directed by Susan Siedelman, is a modernized, simpler, Americanized adaptation of the novel Life and Loves of a She-Devil, penned by Faye Weldon. It displays the journey of a troubled woman and her journey to bettering herself, and ultimately getting revenge on the man who has wronged her, and his mistress as well. With a few comedic touches, it strives to lighten up a novel with serious, jealousy-filled content, providing viewers with comic relief. She-Devil begins introducing viewers to Ruth, who is preparing for a night out with her husband. Here, she meets Mary Fisher, his soon-to-be mistress, and spills a drink on her. This then leads to the meeting between Bob Patrick and Mary Fisher, thus sparking the beginnings of their passionate affair. After becoming Mary's accountant upon one night together, Bob is away from the house frequently, leading to the manifestation of Ruth's suspicions. However, even after she realizes infidelity is taking place, she still decides to wait until he comes around again. The crucial scene that was chosen from the film demonstrates Ruth's realization of her husband's infidelity and her initial willingness to stick around. She declares Bob as having an affair. Bob denies it as if he's reading her mind, and then the scenes progress with the intentions of disproving Bob's confession.
Ever do anything to hurt you and the kids? Come on, honey. Trust me.
Snippets of Bob and Mary's separate life are shown while Ruth lives alone with her two children, waiting for him to crawl back to her. This moment is pivotal. Ruth finally grasps the truth and begins to get angry. This is where her journey begins, and although she desperately wants her husband back, she's now aware of what's been going on. As for directorial liberties, this scene differs greatly from the content in the book, as it's able to show scenes between Mary and Bob that the book does not describe, enhancing the seriousness of the affair between the two, even though Ruth believes otherwise. Another large component of the differences is that the novel begins with Ruth knowing of the affair, whereas the movie delays this, most likely to establish more important details beforehand, like how Bob and Mary meet, the build-up of Ruth's suspicions, and Bob's desperation to conceal everything. The film paints Bob as an infidel, but someone who at least attempts to pretend to care for Ruth, whereas the book does the complete opposite. It shows that Bob's careless, open about his affair, and indifferent towards his children. The film's execution is much more realistic, as its plot makes more sense. It depicts Bob in a more realistic light, and includes and adds details that the book leaves out.
Your father loves mushroom soup.
We don't love it. We're eating too, aren't we?
Yes, but tonight we want to make your father very happy.
Why? So I'll stay at home?
The film is set in New York City and its suburbs in the 1980s, and it's shot here as well, creating a more modern effect than the novel does, which is believed to be set in the United Kingdom. Perhaps the film was geared towards a more American audience, and Siedelman was aiming for success in American box offices, and she wanted viewers to be able to identify with what was being viewed. What better way to accomplish this than film in one of the most famous American cities, if not the most famous? NYC is considered to be visually compelling. There are a handful of interesting places to shoot, and it comes in close second to Los Angeles in terms of infrastructure talent. It's home to film students, filmmakers, artists, and film crew that are all ready to serve as interns and apprentices, proving its worthiness as a backdrop for the film. As for the specific setting in the scene, this crucial moment of realization takes place in the bedroom, then goes back and forth from the ordinary Patchett household to lavish restaurants, Mary's mansion, the beach, and the city, indicating a stark contrast between the lives being lived. This is made to be very effective through abrupt transitions that indicate the contradictions between the lives that Mary, Ruth, and Bob are living, as well as the differentiation between Ruth's perspective on things and the reality of it all. What also proves to be crucial in this pivotal scene is the initial lack of a soundtrack. The dialogue between Ruth and Bob is so significant, and it must be heard, as it shows that Bob Patchett is lying to Ruth's face, even though he states otherwise. Here, a close-up of Ruth and Bob is displayed, and this angle is indicative of her stress, anxiety, and hesitance to trust in Bob and his words. As the scene progresses, however, dreamy,
Mary
slow
Fisher, I
classical
hope your
music
pink
begins to
palace
play
crumbles
as
into
Ruth's
the
hateful
sea.
dialogue
I
begins.
hope your
This is
delicate
very
white skin
contradictory.
breaks out
The
in hives
soundtrack
and your
contrasts
shiny
the
blonde
vibe.
hair falls out
The
at
music
the
is
root.
very classical and calming, while Ruth is clearly
But
in emotional
meanwhile,
turmoil.
I will watch and wait.
Her emotional turmoil stems from the fact that she's obviously being cheated on with Meryl Streep's character, Mary Fisher, who is typically everything that any man would want in a woman. Blonde, beautiful, thin, rich, with extravagant, elegant clothing. Roseanne Barr's character, on the other hand, is made to be overweight and not conventionally attractive. This concept contributes to the idea that her husband, Bob Patchett, played by Ed Bagley, who is blonde, decent-looking, tall, and motivated, would indeed leave her for Mary Fisher. Ruth dresses in raggedy, unattractive clothing and is left to do all the housework, indicating both her weakness and strength as a woman. In the part of the scene where she is fixing the sink, the camera angle looks down upon Ruth, focusing on the fact that she's forced to be in a weakened position because she's the one that has been left. When Ruth mows the lawn, however, the angle changes, showing her strength because mowing the lawn is a task that is usually equated to strength and masculinity. The mower itself is indicative of the fact that Ruth is now both the man and woman of the house. She's a multifaceted woman who adheres to both womanly duties and manly duties, showing that she is capable of breaking gender norms. However, despite her ability to overcome these gender norms and serve as the man and the woman of the house, she is still overcome with jealousy that is produced by her shadow. She's jealous of Mary and Bob's love, and this love is symbolized by the ring Mary gives to Bob. Her shadow causes her to think irrationally and manifest a deep hatred for both Mary and Bob, which, even though is rightfully merited, is out of control at times. In addition to being controlled by her shadow, Ruth is also controlled by a power struggle between herself and her husband. Bob Patchett has had a hold on her for so long, and she is absolutely convinced that she's able to stay in a crumbling marriage, even though she knows of Bob's infidelity, which reiterates a sense of false consciousness that Marxism discusses. Overall, Susan Siedelman had high hopes for the film, and hoped that her artistic liberties would take the film far, and to a certain extent this dream was achieved, as it had been nominated for a Golden Globe and achieved relative success at the box office. She-Devil was meant to serve as a lighthearted, comedic take on a rather serious novel, and it can be said that the target audience was geared towards women, mainly because in society, many females can identify with the insecurities, jealousy, and tumultuous feelings that come with being in the presence of a disloyal man. Despite Siedelman's efforts, though, many critics referred to the film as mediocre and lackluster, while some slammed it, declaring it an outright mess. It was referred to as imperfect, but with an intricate plot. Even though the film itself was not a blockbuster, the liberties that Susan Siedelman took it upon herself to take really brought the novel to life and allowed viewers to identify with the protagonist, feel her pain, laugh with her, and accompany her on her journey to reinvention and revenge, proving that it indeed did serve as an effective adaptation of the novel Life and Loves of a She-Devil.